in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. This is UCY.tv with the Solvinur Event, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, every Saturday. I'm your host, Walter, and usually I talk about things that have to do with the trivium or mythology, things like that. And there's a chat room where you can ask questions or talk to other people. You can get there if you go to ucy.tv. And there's a chat link right beneath the player and alternative players below. So, the 3rd of October 2015. Well, you should. Okay. I was just thinking that I might have been, like, not on air. But everything seems to be fine. There's a couple of people in the chat there. Let's see who's here. There's Grumpy, JJ, Jules, Matty, Victory Through Vegetables, and Mr. Vince. Welcome, everybody. And one unknown also, welcome. This thing we did last week about principles of general grammar, I thought it might have to do with general grammar in the sense of building blocks. But this seems to be, and I'm not quite sure yet about it, I really need to think about it a bit more, but it seems to be that this is special grammar, right? They're talking about nouns and how the word is a connection. And this seems to be more like how words relate to each other within a specific language, right? So that really, it sounds like special grammar. That's not what we were looking for. So I'm going to skip that until I figure out if it's really worth reading all of this. Because you should have had this at grade 6 or something. Maybe 8, I don't know. When I went to Canada, I found that the whole schooling system was 2 years behind in compared to the Netherlands, except for one topic, which was computer science or something like that. Anyway, we had to learn to go play with computers. That was in 1979. In Holland we weren't really into that at that point. That came later with the computers. So, you should have had this at like grade 6 or 8. What are nouns, what are verbs, and things like that. We used to have it a lot at what we call the lower school. It used to be divided into a lower school, and then depending on how you did there, the first 6 years of your imprisonment, you went to a different kind of prison. Yeah. So that went away. They're no longer called classes. They are now called groups. I guess that's newspeak, because, you know, it belongs on the class you come from, what class you're going to go to, if you get my drift. So, you know, a lot of things have changed, and it's still a prison system, basically, where you get indoctrinated to be able to function in a insane society. Alright, so we'll not do that. We were at page 24 about nouns, but we got a new webpage we found a couple of weeks ago, right? More logical fallacies, and there's so many of them. This one is called Alternative Advance. It's also known as lose-lose situation. Description. When one is presented with just two choices, both of which are essentially the same, just worded differently. Well, two choices which are essentially the same, or you could say there which outcome is essentially the same. This technique is often used in sales. Fallacious reasoning would be committed by the person accepting the options as the only options, which would most likely be on a subconscious level, since virtually anyone, if they thought about it, would recognize other options exist. Huh. So, as an example is given, Max says, if you're not a witch, you have nothing to fear. If you're not a witch, you are not made of wood. Therefore, you will sink and drown after we tie you up and throw you in the well. If you do float, then you are made of wood. You are a witch, and we will hang you. And then Glinda says, wait, how is it I have nothing to worry if I'm not a witch? Explanation. The argument is created so that any woman accused of being a witch will die, which is certainly a lose-lose situation. Here's our next example. Guy working a booth in the mall. Excuse me, but do you look like you can use a vacation? Do you have a few minutes to chat about vacation destinations? Or would you prefer I just send you some information by email? Yeah, that's a good example. Of course, other options include just ignoring the guy and keep walking, telling the guy no thank you and keep walking, or grabbing the guy's vacation literature, whacking him over the head with it, and then keep walking. Exception. If you engage your critical thinking and realize other options exist, and still choose one of the given options, you would not be guilty of fallacious reasoning. Tip. Whenever you are presented with options, carefully consider the possibility of other options not mentioned and propose them. Yeah, I heard in regards, kind of like touching on this, when you are presented with options. Hold on. Drink of coffee. I don't know exactly where, but it had to do with climate change. And I think it was in the Corbett report from the archives. A special series is that FTA from the archives. If you Google that, you will find, now I forgot his name, episodes of him. And on there was mention about the creation of the IPCC, and they were divided into groups, and 60%, no, not 60, 60% had to make a recommendation based on what the other 40% had calculated. So they were like the science team. And so this smaller team would tell the bigger team, well, we've got global warming, for instance. And then the bigger team would start making recommendations as to what are we going to do now. And there's two more groups, but the point was that when the rules were set up for how to investigate this, the reference, I believe they call it, to place it in a certain reference, had to be that it was man-made. And so the people making calculations, the science team, were not allowed to look at outside options, right? That's why I said it ties to this. Like the sun, for instance, or natural variances, right? They weren't allowed to take them into their scientific calculations. And so that is one reason why there is so much disagreement, right? Because most people don't even know this, that there were these references within which they had to do their job, and the references were so many and built in such a way that it had the outcome that was wanted, right? Now, if I don't remember James Corbett, I don't remember who exactly was in charge of all of that, but I got it from James Corbett's from the archive series episode. What was it, 96 or 108, something like that. So. Yeah, always, when you're presented with stuff from so-called scientists or experts or whatever, use your own brain and try and think of other options if they only give like 2 or maybe 3 that are not acceptable. All right. Let's move on to ambiguity fallacy. I think we know about this one. Ambiguous. Also known as amphiboly, semantical ambiguity, type token ambiguity, form of, type token, what the heck is that? And vagueness. Description. When an unclear phrase with multiple definitions is used within the argument, therefore, does not support the conclusion. Excuse me, I don't get this. When an unclear phrase with multiple definitions is used within the argument, and then it says dot, comma, do you guys call that semicolon or something like that? Because I don't get this. I don't get it. That one. It's strange. when an unclear phrase with multiple definitions is used within the argument, therefore does not support the conclusion. No, I don't get it. Anyway, some will say single words count for ambiguity fallacy, which is really a specific form of fallacy known as equivocation. Tough one. Maybe I'll put this in chat. Maybe somebody in chat can figure it out. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. It has a logical form. Claim X is made. Y is concluded based on an ambiguous understanding of X. Right? So there's a failure to define the terms. Example 1. It is said that we have a good understanding of our universe. Therefore, we know exactly how it began and exactly when. The ambiguity here is what exactly good understanding means. The conclusion assumes a much better understanding than is suggested in the premise. Therefore, we have the ambiguity fallacy. Example 2. All living beings come from other living beings. Semicolon. Yeah, thanks, Vince. Semile. Yeah. Example 2. All living beings come from other living beings. Therefore, the first forms of life must have come from a living being. That living being is God. Yeah, wow, what a jumps. Infinite regress is what comes up here, right? All living beings come from other living beings. That in itself, the first sentence, is leading to infinite regression. And that's not allowed in philosophy. There, let alone the jump to that living being is God. Explanation. This argument is guilty of two cases of ambiguity. First, the first use of the phrase come from refers to reproduction, whereas the second use refers to origin. Yeah. The fact that we know quite a bit about reproduction is irrelevant when considering origin. Yeah. Second, the first use of living being refers to an empirically verifiable biological living organism. The second use of a living being refers to a belief or an immaterial God. As you can see, when a term such as living being describes a dodo bird as well as the all-powerful master of the universe, it has very little meaning and certainly is not specific enough to draw logical or reasonable conclusions. Yeah. Good one. Exception. Ambiguous phrases are extremely common in the English language and are a necessary part of informal logic and reasoning. As long as these ambiguous phrases mean exactly the same thing in all uses of phrase in the argument, the fallacy is not committed. Okay. This is variation. The type token fallacy is committed when a word can refer to either a type, like cars, or token. Says here Prius, RAV4, and Camry is used in a way that makes it unclear which it refers to. The statement is ambiguous. Toyota manufactures dozens of cars. This obviously refers to the different types of cars, not how many instances or tokens of each car were manufactured. Yeah. Good one. Alright, next. This one we probably know, but I like to read them anyway, because this is a good site, gives good explanations and examples, descriptions. This one is called Anonymous Authority. Most of you will know this one. Description. When an unspecified source is used as evidence for the claim. This is commonly indicated by phrases such as, they say that, it has been said, I heard that, studies show, or generalized groups such as scientists say. When we fail to specify a source of the authority, we can't verify the source, thus the credibility of the argument. Appeals to anonymous sources are more often than not either a way to fabricate, exaggerate, or misrepresent facts in order to deceive others into accepting your claim. At times, this deception is done subconsciously. It might not always be deliberate. Logical form. Person 1 once heard that X was true, therefore X is true. Appeal to authority, right? Example 1. You know, they say that if you swallow gum, it takes 7 years to digest, so whatever you do, don't swallow the gum. Explanation. They are wrong as they usually are. Gum passes through the system relatively unchanged, but does not hang around for 7 years like a college student terrified to get a job. They is a common form of appeal to anonymous authority. Example 2. The 13.7 billion year old universe is a big conspiracy. I read this article once where these notable scientists found strong evidence that the universe was created 6,000 years ago. But because of losing their jobs, they were forced to keep quiet. Explanation. Without knowing who these scientists are or the credibility of the source of the article, we cannot verify the evidence. Therefore, we should not accept the evidence. Exception. At times, an accepted fact uses the same indicating phrases as the ones used for the fallacy. Therefore, if the anonymous authority is actually just a statement or an accepted fact, it should be accepted as evidence. Is there another passage here? Climate change is happening and always has been. Scientists say the Earth is certainly in a warming phase, but there is some debate on the exact causes and certainly more debate on what should be done about it politically. And then tip, be very wary of they. Right, so here it says climate change is happening and always has been, and then scientists say, so that's unnamed authority, right, scientists. Appeal to accomplishment. Also known as appeal to success. Yeah. Description. When the argument being made is sheltered from criticism, based on a level of accomplishment of the one making the argument. A form of this fallacy also occurs when arguments are evaluated on the accomplishments or success of the person making the argument, rather than on the merits of the argument itself. Okay. Logical form. Person 1 claims that Y is true. Person 1 is very accomplished, therefore Y is true. Person 1 presents evidence against claim Y. Person 1 is told to shut up until person 1 becomes as accomplished as person 2. Example. I've been around the block many times and I have had my share of success, so believe me when I tell you that there is no better hobby than cat juggling. Explanation. We can all admire accomplishment and success, but this is irrelevant to cat juggling. There are many accomplished and successful people who are immoral, mean, insensitive, hateful, liars, miserable, and just plain wrong about a great many things. And I don't know if you've heard that, but there's somebody at my door. All right, there we are. I'm sorry about that. Where were we? Example 2. I hold a doctorate in theology, have written 12 books, and personally met the Pope. Therefore, when I say that Jesus' favorite snack was raisins dipped in wine, you should believe me. Explanation. While the credentials of the one making the statement are certainly impressive, in no way do these credentials lend credibility to the belief that Jesus' favorite snack was wine-dipped raisins. Exception. When one's accomplishments are directly related to the argument, it is more meaningful. I've been around the block many times, and I have had my share of success in real estate. So believe me when I tell you that, if you know what you are doing, real estate can be a great way to make a great living. Tip. Many successful people attempt to use their success as a wild card, to be an authority on everything. Don't allow one's own success to cloud your judgment of the claims they are making. Evaluate the evidence above all else. Alright, next. Appeal to anger. Falls under appeal to emotion category. Also known as appeal to spite. Argumentum ad odium, some form of. Appeal to hatred. Loathing. Appeal to outrage. Description. When the emotions of anger, hatred, or rage are substituted for evidence in an argument. Logical form. Person 1 claims that X is true. Person 1 is outraged. Therefore, X is true. Claim A is made. You are outraged by claim A. Therefore, claim A is true or false. Example. Are you tired of being ignored by your government? Is it right that the top 1% have so much when the rest of us have so little? I urge you to vote for me today. Yeah. Explanation. This is a common tactic to play on the emotions of others to get them to do what you want them to do. The fact is, no evidence was given or claim was made linking your vote with the problems going away. The politician will hope you will make the connection while she can claim innocence down the road when the people attempt to hold the politician to a promise she really never made. Example 2. How can you possibly think that humans evolved from monkeys? Do I look like a flippin' monkey to you? Explanation. Ignoring the fact that we didn't evolve from monkeys, we share a common ancestor with modern African apes, the fact that the arguer is obviously offended is irrelevant to the facts. Exception. Like all appeals to emotion, they work very well when used, in addition to a supported conclusion, not in place of one. Are you tired of being ignored by your government? Is it right that the top 1% have so much when the rest of us have so little? I urge you to vote for me today, and I will spend my career making America a place where the wealth is more evenly distributed. Goes on to tip. The great Yoda once said, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. With all due respect to the cute little green guy, anger can be very powerful and effective, as well as lead to great things. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. And then, by the way, Yoda's statement actually commits the slippery slope fallacy. Okay, next. Appeal to authority. Okay, well, I guess we can skip that one, right? We did that so many times. Appeal to celebrity. Description. Accepting a claim of a celebrity based on his or her celebrity status, not on the strength of the argument. Seems logical enough, right? The form. Celebrity 1 says to use product Y, therefore we should use product Y. Tom Cruise says on TV that Billy Boy butter is the best tasting butter there is. Tom Cruise is awesome, especially in MI4 when he scaled that building with only one suction glove. What the heck is that? Therefore, Billy Boy butter is the best tasting butter there is. Explanation. Tom Cruise might be awesome, and perhaps he really does think Billy Boy butter is the best tasting butter there is. But Tom is no more an authority on the taste of butter than anyone else. Therefore, to accept the claim without any other evidence or reason is fallacious. Mike Sevier, something like that, from the 80s sitcom Growing Pains is really cool. He is now a born-again Christian and apologist for the faith. Therefore, you should really believe what he has to say. Explanation. Mike Sevier is awesome, but Kirk Cameron, the actor that plays that character? Even if Kirk was super duper, which he might be, I don't know him, his views on the truth of religion are equally valid as yours, or anyone else's, who determines what he or she considers to be the truth through faith. Exception. Some celebrity endorsements are authentic, when the celebrities are motivated by the love of the product itself, not the huge check they are getting for pretending to like the product. When these products are directly related to their celebrity status, then this could be seen as a valid but not sufficient reason for wanting the product. And then new sentence, one before the tip comes. Honestly, I really can't think of any examples, but there must be some out there. Tip. If you are in business and looking for a celebrity to endorse your product, try not to pick one that is likely to be accused of killing his wife and his wife's lover, then taking off in a white Bronco. Okay. Appeal to coincidence. Okay. Interesting. Also known as appeal to luck or appeal to bad luck. Description. Concluding that a result is due to chance when the evidence strongly suggests otherwise. The appeal to luck variation uses luck in place of coincidence or chance. The form. Evidence suggests that X is the result of Y. Yet, one insists that X is the result of chance. Example. Bill. Bill says, Steve, I'm sorry to say, but you are a horrible driver. And Steve says, why do you say that? Then Bill says, this is your 14th accident this year. And then Steve says, it's just been an unlucky year for me. Explanation. Based on statistical norms, it is very clear that anyone getting into 14 accidents in a single year has a safety issue as a driver. Ignoring this obvious fact and writing it off as bad luck is seen as the appeal to coincidence. Example 2. Mom says, this is the 8th time you have been sent to the principal's office this year. The principal tells me she has seen you more times in her office than any other student. Why is this? And Dwight says, a teacher just happens to sneak up on me whenever I'm doing something against the rules, which is no more often than any other student. Explanation. Dwight is a troublemaker, that's clear. Rather than face the facts, he is appealing to coincidence by suggesting he just gets caught more often due to bad timing. Exception. Coincidence do happen. When the evidence points in the direction of coincidence, the coincidence might be the best option. Okay. Appeal to common belief. Alright. I think we've done that too many times also. So we'll go to appeal to common folk. Also known as appeal to the common man. Description. Excuse me guys, I still got a very bad cold. So I might be coughing up a little now and then. Let's see, where's my cigarettes? Ta-da, make me a smoke. Description of appeal to common folk. Yeah, there's another thing that I was remembering when thinking about words. And sometimes the same explanation can be given in Dutch as in English, and in this case that's also the case with the word folk. F-O-L-K, folk. In my best English, right? Folk. And in Dutch it's more or less the same. It's V-O-L-K, and it's pronounced volk. However, in Dutch, if you replace the K with a G, you get volg, which means follow. There you have the F-O-L from folk. So the word folk and follow are probably etymologically tied. And that's not strange, is it? When most people are followers. That's probably the reason why it's called folk. Alright. In place of evidence, this is the description, in place of evidence attempting to establish a connection to the audience based on being a regular person, just like each of them, then suggesting that your position is something that all common folk believe or should accept. Nice. Logical form. Logical form, X is just common folk wisdom. Therefore, you should accept X. More of this. Person 1 is a common man who proposes Y. You are also a common man. Therefore, you should accept Y. Example. My fellow Americans, I'm just like you. Sure, I have a few private jets and homes in 12 countries, but I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like you common people. Jesus Christ. So believe me when I say, this increase in taxes for the common folk is just what we all need. Explanation, there's no valid reason given for the increase in taxes. We should read, there's no valid reason given for the increase in extortion. Example 2. You don't want a hot dog and beer? Eating hot dogs and drinking beer at a baseball game is the American thing to do. Explanation. Here the person making the argument is appealing to the tradition of the common folk. Exception. If the common folk appeal is made in addition to valid reasons, then it is not a fallacy, although I would argue it is cheap pandering that many people can easily detect. Kai. There's another spike in your shield with which you can defend yourself. Appeal to consequences. Yeah, we did that one too many times also. Oh, this one. Appeal to definition. It has an asterisk at the end also. I don't know what that means. So an asterisk at the bottom? Nope. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see, where is he? Here he is. Appeal to definition, also known as appeal to the dictionary. Definition. Using a dictionary's limited definition of a term as evidence that the term cannot have any other meaning, expanded meaning, or even conflicting meaning. This is a fallacy because dictionaries don't reason. They simply are a reflection of an abbreviated version of the current accepted usage of a term, as determined through argumentation and eventual acceptance. In short, dictionaries tell you what a word meant according to the authors, at the time of its writing, not what it meant before that time, after, or what it should mean. Yeah. It's, you know, according to the authors at the time of its writing, it just reminds me so much of Newspeak, right? We should just accept new definitions for words. That way we will speak Newspeak in a couple of generations. Dictionary meanings are usually concise and lack the depth found in an encyclopedia. Therefore, terms found in dictionaries are often incomplete when it comes to helping people to gain a full understanding of the term. Logical form. The dictionary definition of X does not mention Y. Therefore, Y must not be a part of X. Example. Ken, do you think gay marriage should be legalized? Paul, absolutely not. Marriage is defined as a union between a man and a woman, not between two men or two women. Ken, did you know that in the 1828 the dictionary definition of marriage included for securing the maintenance and education of children? Does that mean that all married couples who can't or choose not to have children aren't really married? Paul, no, it just means they need to buy updated dictionaries. And then Ken says, as do you. The current Merriam-Webster dictionary includes as a secondary definition the state of being united to a person of the same sex in a relationship like that of a traditional marriage. All right. Yeah. See how you reinforce, because I remember this from long ago. We still had TV at home. Don't know how old I was, but young. And my dad always had to have the news on. And one day this news speaker said, well, 4 new words have been added to the Dutch dictionary. And then some group of people, they didn't specify who exactly was in charge of adding new words, but they gave a little bit of explanation about how that was going to happen. But that's kind of the Newspeak Commission, right? The people that decide what gets into the dictionary. Example 2. Armando, Miss Patterson was wrong to knock off 10 points of my oral presentation because I kept using the word erection instead of building. Felix, that was hilarious, but did you honestly think you would not get in trouble? Armando, no, my dictionary says that an erection is a building. Explanation. Armando might be right, but the dictionary is not the final authority on all issues, especially social behavior. More modern usage, especially in high school setting, takes precedence in this case. Exception. The dictionary works well when the term in question is a result of a misunderstanding or ignorance. For example, Ken, do you accept biological evolution? And then Paul says, no. Because I know for a fact that my grandfather was not a monkey. And Ken says, good Lord. Oh, I thought Paul was going to bring up the Lord, but... Tip, don't be afraid to argue with authority if you believe you are right, even when that authority is the dictionary. Yeah, well, it just comes down to define your terms, you know. Who the heck cares about the dictionary in that case? Appeal to desperation is next. Description. Arguing that your conclusion, solution, or proposition is right based on the fact that something must be done, and your solution is something. Interesting. Logical form. Something must be done. X is something, therefore X must be done. Example. These are desperate times, and desperate times call for desperate measures. Therefore, I propose we exterminate all baby seals. It is obvious that something must be done, and this is something. Explanation. No reason is given for why we should exterminate all baby seals. Perhaps the reason is that they all have a virus that will spread to the human race and kill us. Perhaps exterminating all baby seals will leave more fish for humans. Or perhaps exterminating all baby seals will be a way to put an end to the clubbing of baby seals. But without these or any other reasons given, we have nothing to go on except the desperation that something must be done. Example 2. Chairman says, "We are out of money coming Monday. Any suggestions?" Felix says, "I suggest we take what money we do have and go to Disney World." Chairman, any other suggestions? Nobody speaks. And then the chairman says, "Since there are no other suggestions, Disney World it is." Explanation. Desperate times don't necessarily call for any measure over no measure. Many times, no action is better than a bad action. Blowing what money is left on overpriced soft drinks and what appears to be rotisserie, ostrich legs, something like that, may not be a wise choice, especially when investors are involved. Exception. At times, especially in situations when time is limited, taking some action will be better than taking no action. And in the absence of better reasoning, the best available reason might have to do. However, a reason, no matter how poor, should still be given, not simply a conclusion. Blah, blah. Tip. Do your best to avoid situations of desperation where emotion very often takes the lead over reason. Although not all desperate situations can be avoided, many can, by proper planning and foresight. Appeal to emotion, right? That's like a group. We've done that a lot. Here's one that I explained only once. I came up with this one myself from a different book. It was talking about how to win an argument, but it was not like a nice book. It was a book of how to use logical fallacies. Right? It was not a nice book about what logical path your argument should have, or something like that. Or syllogism wasn't even mentioned. And there they were talking about extremes also, and this is the first website where it also appears. So appeal to extremes, also known as reductio ad absurdum, misuse of, a slippery slope fallacy, a form of. Description, erroneously attempting to make a reasonable argument into an absurd one by taking the argument to the extremes. Logical form, if X is true, then Y must also be true, where Y is the extreme of X. Example 1. There is no way Those Girl Scouts could have sold all those cases of cookies in 1 hour. If they did, they would have to make $500 in 1 hour, which, based on an 8-hour day, is over $1 million a year. That is more than most lawyers, doctors, and successful business people make. Alright, explanation. The Girl Scouts worked just for 1 hour, not 40 per week for a year, suggesting the extreme leads to an absurd conclusion, that Girl Scouts are among the highest paid people in the world. Not to mention, there's a whole troop of them doing the work, not just one girl. Example 2. Don't forget God's commandment. Thou shalt not kill. By using mouthwash, you are killing 99% of the germs that cause bad breath. Prepare for hell. Explanation. It is unlikely that God had mouthwash on his mind when issuing that commandment. But if he did, we're all screwed. At least those of us with fresh breath. Exception. This fallacy is a misuse of one of the greatest techniques in argumentation. Reductio ad absurdum, or reducing the argument to the absurd. The difference is where the absurdity actually is, in the argument or in the reasoning of the one trying to show the argument is absurd. Here is an example of an argument that is proven false by reducing to the absurd legitimately. Big Tony says, the more you exercise, the stronger you will get. Nerdy nerd, actually, if you just keep exercising and never stopped, you would eventually drop dead. There is a limit to how much exercise you should get. Tip. People very often say stupid things. Sometimes it is easy to reduce their arguments to absurdity. But remember, in most cases your goal should be diplomacy, not making the other person look foolish, especially when dealing with your wife, unless you really like sleeping on the couch. Appeal to faith. Let's see. Appeal to faith. Description. This is an abandonment of reason in an argument and a call to faith, usually when reason clearly leads to disproving the conclusion of an argument. It is the assertion that one must have, the right kind of, faith in order to understand the argument. Even arguments that heavily rely on reason, that ultimately require faith, abandon reason. Logical form. X is true. If you have faith, you will see that. Example. Jimmy says, Joseph Smith, that all-American prophet, was the blonde-haired, blue-eyed voice of God. And Holy says, what is your evidence for that? And Jimmy says, I don't need evidence, I only need faith. Explanation. There are some things some believe that are beyond reason and logic. Fair enough, but the moment we accept this, absent of any objective method of telling what is beyond reason and why, anything goes. Anything can be explained away without having to explain anything. Example 2. Tom, did you know that souls, and then brackets open, thetans, brackets close, reincarnate and have lived on other planets before living on Earth, and Xenu was the tyrant ruler of the Galactic Confederacy. And then Mike says, no, I didn't know that. How do you know that? And then Tom says, I know this through my faith. Do you think everything can be known by science alone? Your faith is weak, my friend. Explanation. It should be obvious that reason and logic are not being used, but rather faith. While Tom might be right, there is still no valid reason offered. The problem also arises in the vagueness of the appeal to faith. Tom's answer can be used to answer virtually any question imaginable, yet the answer is really a deflection. Saint Bingo says, you need to massage my feet. And then Tina says, why? Saint Bingo says, my child, you will only see that answer clearly through the eyes of faith. And then, exception? No exception. The appeal to faith is always a fallacy when used to justify a conclusion in the absence of reason. Appeal to fear, ad baculum, we know that one. Appeal to flattery, we've done that one. Appeal to force, that's interesting. Appeal to force, ad baculum, yeah, so how do they then appeal to fear? What do they call that then? Appeal to fear, argumentum in terrorem, aha, alright. So now we've learned something new again. Yeah, I guess they are kind of linked though. We'll do them both so we can see the little difference that there is between them. Argumentum in terrorem, also known as argumentum ad metum, argument from adverse consequences, scare tactics. Right? Remember that, scare tactics. Description. When fear not based on evidence or reason is being used as a primary motivator to get others to accept an idea, proposition or conclusion. Logical form. If you don't accept X as true, something terrible will happen to you. Therefore, X must be true. Example 1. If we don't bail out the big automakers, the US economy will collapse. Therefore, we need to bail out the automakers. Explanation. There might be plenty of legitimate reasons to bail out the automakers. Reason based on evidence and probability. But a collapsed economy is not one of them. Example 2. Timmy says, Mom, what if I don't believe in God? And Mom says, then you'll burn in hell forever. Why do you ask? Timmy says, no reason. Explanation. Timmy's faith is waning, but Mom, like most moms, is very good at scaring the hell, in this case, into Timmy. This is a fallacy because Mom provided no evidence that disbelief in God will lead to an eternity of suffering in hell. But because the possibility is terrifying to Timmy, he accepts the proposition to believe in God, despite the lack of actual evidence. Exception. When fear is not primary motivator but a supporting one, and the possibilities of the fearful event happening are honestly disclosed, it would not be fallacious. Tim says, Mom, what if I don't believe in God? And then Mom says, then I would hope that you don't believe in God for the right reasons, and not because of your father, and I didn't do a good enough job telling you why you should believe in him, including the possibility of what some believe is eternal suffering in hell. And then Tim says, that's a great answer, Mom. I love you. You are so much better than my mom in the other example. Really? Tip. Think in terms of probabilities, not possibilities. Anything is possible, including a lion busting in your home at night and mauling you to death. But it's very, very improbable. People who use fear to manipulate you count on you to be irrational and emotional rather than reasonable and calculating. So that's appeal to fear or argument in terrorem. Next is argument ad baculum, also known as argument to the cudgel, appeal to the stick, argument by vehemence, form of. Description: when force, coercion, or even a threat of force is used in place of a reason in an attempt to justify a conclusion. Right, so the fear comes back in the threat of force. Logical form: if you don't accept X as true, I will hurt you. Right? If you don't believe in God, you will go to hell. Example 1. Melvin says, "Boss, why do I have to work weekends when nobody else in the company does?" And then boss, "Am I sensing insubordination? I can find another employee very quickly. Thanks to Craigslist, you know." Explanation: Melvin has asked a legitimate question to which he did not get a legitimate answer. Rather, his question was deflected by a threat of force, of being forced out of his job. Example 2. Jordan, Dad, why do I have to spend my summer at Jesus camp? Dad says, because if you don't, you will spend your entire summer in your room with nothing but your Bible. Wow. Explanation: instead of a reason, Dad gave Jordan a description of a punishment that would happen. Exception: if the force, coercion, or threat of force is not being used as a reason, but as a fact or consequence, then it would not be fallacious, especially when a legitimate reason is given, when the legitimate reason is given with the threat, direct or implied. Melvin says, "Boss, why do I have to wear this goofy-looking hard hat?" Boss, it's state law, therefore company policy, no hat, no job. Tip: unless you are indentured servant, slave, or still living with your parents, slave, do not allow others to force you into accepting something as true. Alright, so I don't really get this. Tip says, unless you are an indentured servant, brackets open, slave, brackets close, or still living with your parents, brackets open, slave, brackets close, do not allow others to force you into accepting something as true. Okay. So why is that word slave in there? This is not, this is a website for normal people, for everybody, right? Why would they put slave in there? Variation. Argument by vehemence, something like that, is being very loud in place of being right. This is a form of force, and basically frightening your opponent into submission. Alright. Appeal to flattery we done, force we done, appeal to heaven. Interesting. Appeal to heaven, Deus vult, apparently. Also known as Gott mit uns. Das ist ja Deutsch, Mensch. Yeah, that was a bit of German. Also known as Gott mit uns. That means God with us, literally. Translated. Manifest destiny. Special covenant. Description: asserting the conclusion must be accepted because it is will of God, or the will of the gods, in the mind of those committing the fallacy, and those allowing to pass as a valid reason. The will of God is not only knowable, but the person making the argument knows it, and no other reason is necessary. So, this is hard for me to imagine, you know. I'm trying to put myself in the one making this fallacy, but because, you know, I lack faith in any God. Anyway, the logical form, God wants us to X, therefore we should X. Example, judge. So why did you chop those people into little pieces and put the pieces in a blender? Crazy Larry, because God told me to do it. Judge, good enough for me. Next case. Explanation. We should all be thankful that our legal system does not work this way, but human thinking does. Every day people do things or don't do things according to what they believe is the will of their God. Yeah, unbelievable, right? Fortunately, most of the time this does not include a blender. Example 2. Ian, what is the story of Abraham and Isaac regarded as such a beautiful Christian story? The guy was about to burn his son alive as a human sacrifice. Yeah. Wallace says, because it was the will of God that Abraham was following, no matter how difficult it was for him. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, can you believe this crap? Just like they're all admiring and adoring and deifying this tortured person who's nailed to a cross, as if that's something nice. Right? It's just insane. And then Ian says, I guess as long as it was the will of God, being asked to burn children alive is a beautiful thing. Yeah. Can you get any crazier? I guess so. Explanation. One needs to ask, how do you know it is the will of God? Satan is said to be the great deceiver. He would only be great if those being deceived couldn't tell the difference between God and Satan. In reality, appealing to heaven or God is an abandonment of logic and reason, as we have seen, potentially extremely dangerous. Exception, when the supposed will of God is in line with what someone would already do or believe based on reason, no fallacy is committed. I choose, then it goes on, right? I choose not to kill other people because I would not want them choosing to kill me. Plus, I don't believe that God wouldn't like it if I did it. Tip, sometimes the only difference between faithfulness and insanity is adherence to the law. Alright. Appeal to nature. Argument ad naturam. Description. Coffee. Let's see. Cigarettes. Description. When used as a fallacy, the belief or suggestion that natural is always better than unnatural. Many people adopt this as a default belief. The appeal to nature fallacy should not be confused with the naturalistic fallacy. Though through confused online sources, the two have become synonymous. But if you want to impress your friends, insist that the two are very different and tell them why. Logical forms. X is natural, Y is not natural. Right. Therefore, X is better than Y. Example 1. I shop at Natural Happy Sunshine Store, which is much better than your grocery store, because at the Natural Happy Sunshine Store, everything is natural, including the 38-year-old store manager's long gray hair and saggy breasts. Explanation. I can appreciate natural food and product as much as the next granola eating guy, but to make any claim of betterness, one needs to establish criteria by which to judge. Perhaps not paying almost twice as much for the same general food is better for me. Perhaps I prefer a little insecticide on my apple to insects inside my apple. And maybe I like fox brunettes with pesky, perky breasts due to unnatural bra support. Natural is not always better. Example 2. Cocaine is all natural, therefore it's good for you. Explanation. There are very many things in this world that are all natural and very bad for you besides cocaine, including earthquakes, monsoons, viruses, just to name a few. Whereas unnatural things such as aspirin, pacemakers and surgery can be very good things. Yeah. Unnatural, maybe you could say manufactured for that. Manufactory. Exception. There are many natural things that are better than unnatural, but they must be evaluated based on other criteria besides the naturalness. Tip. Keep in mind that Mother Nature is the kind of mother who wouldn't hesitate to throw you in a dumpster and leave you there to die. That's, yeah. Some philosophers would agree. I would be one of them. Appeal to normality. Appeal to normality. Using social norms to determine what is good or bad. It is the idea that normality is the standard of goodness. This is fallacious because social norms are not the same as norms found in nature, or norms that are synonymous with the ideal function of a created system. The conclusion, therefore it is good, is often unspoken but clearly implied. Logical form. X is considered normal behavior, therefore X is good behavior. X is considered normal behavior, therefore we shall strive for X, normality. Example 1. I am only slightly obese. That is perfectly normal here in America. Explanation. The person is correct that being slightly obese is considered normal in America. In no ways is this a good thing by virtually any measure of goodness. Athletes and those who make their health and fitness a priority are far from normal, but viewing that level of health and fitness as bad is clearly fallacious. Example 2. Why doesn't Tim get a real job like normal people instead of trying to launch that internet business from home? Explanation. Tim is not like normal people when it comes to work. He is part of a minority to dream big and follow their dreams. Tim might make it big or he might not. Without the Tims of the world, the normal people would have no place to get a real job. Interesting. Exception. There are circumstances where eccentric or unusual behavior can be problematic. These are situations where even slight deviations from the norm have been demonstrated to have negative results. Another exception is when normal is used in such a way to balance negative social behavior. For example, a mother may yell at her misbehaving child to act normal at a school open house. There is no implication here that being normal is the ideal behavior, just an immediate and realistic improvement from the current behavior. Tip. For the most part, being normal or average is nothing to be proud of. Appeal to novelty. Right. Kind of opposite to appeal to tradition. Appeal to tradition. So we did novelty a couple of times already. Pity, we also did popularity, we also done more than enough times. This is one new. Appeal to possibility. Oh, that's interesting. Also known as appeal to probability, right? So it's another thing that came up, I believe, last week. We should probably get a that's nice, right? Probably get a better understanding of the difference between possible and probable. And I just gave an exactly good sentence, right? There's a whole lot of difference when you say it is possible, it will be possible to get a better understanding of the difference between the word possibility and probability. Then when I say it's probably a good thing to know the difference, right? So that'll help us a long way already. Description. When a conclusion is assumed not because it is probably true, but because it is possible that it is true, no matter how improbable. Right, so don't assume because it's possible. Logical form. X is possible, therefore X is true. This is kind of like what the multiverse people, and I can't even, half like I'm like, do these people really exist that believe that? These multiverse, every possibility, a new reality is born, and X is possible, therefore X is true. Right. Example 1. Brittany, I haven't applied to any other schools besides Harvard. Casey says, do you think that's a good idea? After all, you only have a 2.8 GPA, your SAT scores were pretty bad, and frankly, most people think you are not playing with a full deck. Brittany, are you telling me that it is impossible for me to get in? Casey says, not impossible, but... Then Brittany says, then shut up. Alright? Yes, it is possible that Harvard will accept Brittany to fill some sympathy quota, or perhaps someone at admissions will mix Brittany up with Brittany, the 16-year-old Asian with the 4.0 average, who also discovered a vaccine for a rare flu in her spare time. But because Brittany is appealing to possibility, she is committing this fallacy. Example 2, Dave. Do you know that Jesus was gay? Tim says, and why do you say that? Dave, you have to admit it's possible. And then Tim says, so is the fact you are a moron. Explanation. We cannot assume Jesus was gay based on the possibility alone. This also includes the argument from ignorance fallacy. Concluding a possibility based on missing information. Right? That's argument from ignorance. An outright statement that Jesus was a heterosexual. Exception. When something is argued to be impossible, arguing that it is possible, no matter how improbable, is perfectly acceptable. Okay. Tip. Catch yourself every time when you're about to use the word impossible. Yes, there are many things that are logically and physically impossible, and it is a valid concept and word. But so often we use the word when we really mean improbable. Confusing the impossible with the improbable or unlikely could, in many cases, destroy the possibility of great success. And this is also a good lesson in the difference between probable and possible. Alright. Appeal to ridicule, we've done. Appeal to the moon. Interesting. Also known as bad analogy. A form of description. Using the argument, if we can put a man on the moon, we could, as evidence for the argument. Logical form. If we can put on the moon, if we can put a man on the moon, we can X. Example. If we can put a man on the moon, we can cure all forms of cancer. Explanation. This is a form of weak analogy. Putting a man on the moon is seen to be virtually impossible task, but since we did it, the faulty reasoning is we can then do any virtually impossible task. Remember that mere possibility is not the same as probability. These kinds of arguments are not suggesting mere possibility, but probability, based on the fact that we succeeded getting a man on the moon. Example 2. If NASA can put a man on the moon, you can certainly sleep with me tonight. Explanation. This is an even worse analogy, taking the we out, that the analogy had in common, and replacing it with NASA and you. Now it really makes no sense in the least bit, but I bet that someone somewhere will be convinced by it. Exception. If the argument is for getting a man on the moon again, then this would work. See. Appeal to tradition, we did. Appeal to emotive language. Yeah. We done that one also. You know, when they use words that are not much used, for instance. Trying to impress you with their, I think that's the one. This is something else. But let's see what we got here. Also known as loaded words, loaded language, euphemisms. Substituting facts. This is the description. Substituting facts and evidence with words that stir up emotion, with the attempt to manipulate others into accepting the truth of the argument. Logical form. Person A claims that X is true. Person A uses very powerful and emotive language in the claim. Therefore, X is true. Example 1. By rejecting God, you are rejecting goodness, kindness, and love itself. Explanation. Instead of just not believing in God, we are rejecting God, which is a much stronger term, especially when God is associated with goodness. Example 2. The Bible is filled with stories of God's magic. Explanation. Instead of using the more accepted term miracles, the word magic is used that connotes powers associated with fantasy and make-believe in an attempt to make the stories in the Bible seem foolish. No, they are not. Example 3. I don't see what's wrong with engaging with services of a professional escort. Explanation. That's just a nice way of saying soliciting a hooker, no matter what you call it, unless you live in certain parts of Nevada or other parts of the world. It's still illegal. Oh, is that what's... I thought he was looking for a moral reason why it was wrong, right? And I'm thinking, okay, let's think very hard here. Can we find a moral reason? No, it has to do with the law. See? And somehow there is this idea ingrained in our system that law is good. Right? They're confusing something that was written down by somebody with morality. Right? Good has to do with morality. Law has to do with what somebody wrote down some time ago. Insanity. Exception. Language is powerful and should be used to draw in emotions, but never at the expense of valid reasoning and evidence. You can hear Walter is a chain smoker. Yeah, well, almost. I smoke a lot. Yes, I do. Can't smoke at work, though. Not all the time, anyway. And this cold doesn't make it better either. Argument by fast talking. Description. When fast talking is seen as intelligence and or confidence in the truth of one's argument. Therefore, seen as evidence of the truth of the argument itself. The fallacy is also committed by the person doing the talking when he or she is deliberately attempting not to allow the audience enough time to process the argument. Therefore, either accepting it or at least not rejecting it. Logical form. According to person 1, Y is true. Person 1 speaks very fast. Therefore, Y is true. Example 1. And I'm supposed to read this extremely fast, but you know, this is not going to happen. If it were Dutch, maybe, but... I hereby submit that it is crystal clear that there is only one true God, without question, without reserve, without hesitation. I can say this because I know the truth and I'm here to share it with you. Praise Allah. Explanation. There is absolutely no evidence in the above claim, and if you read it quickly and clearly, you would persuade more people than if you read it like one of the Beverly Hillbillies. What the heck is that? If your intent was to persuade others by not giving them time to process what you have said, then you would be guilty of this fallacious tactic. Example 2. Should also be read extremely fast. This is not going to happen. I hereby submit that it is crystal clear that there is only one true God. Again, it's just the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. Explanation. Is it? It's exactly the same, right? Yeah, it's exactly the same. So there must have been a misprint here. Huh? Unfortunately, we will skip to exception. Naturally fast talkers must most likely have no intent to deceive, and if you consciously give no undue weight to the claims of a natural fast talker, then no fallacy has been committed. Tip: work on your pace as part of your speaking. It should be just slow enough where you do not lose your audience, and no slower unless going for a dramatic effect. Oh, this is a nice one. Argument by gibberish. Yeah. Also known as bafflement. Argument by prestigious jargon. Yeah, that's what I thought it was. Previous one. This is completely different though. Description. When incomprehensible jargon or plain incoherent gibberish is used to give the appearance of a strong argument in place of evidence or valid reasons to accept the argument. The more common form of this argument is when the person making the argument defaults to highly technical jargon or details not directly related to the argument, then restates the conclusion. Restates the conclusion. Is that something then that he started out with, and is this a form of circular reasoning? Anyway, a logical form, person 1 claims that X is true. Person 1 backs up his claims by gibberish. Therefore, X is true. Example 1. Fortifying the dextrose coherence leads to applicable inherent of explicable tolerance. Therefore, we should not accept this proposal. Explanation. I have no idea what I just wrote, and the audience will have no idea either. But the audience, depending on who the audience is, will most likely make the assumption that I do know what I'm talking about, believe that they are incapable of understanding the argument, and therefore agree with my conclusion since they think I do understand it. This is fallacious reasoning. Example 2. The following can be considered an argument as to why 1/5 of Americans cannot locate the United States on a world map. I personally believe that US Americans are unable to do so because some people out there in our nations don't have maps. And I believe that our education, like such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere like such as, this is really how it goes, the and such. And I believe they should, our education over here in the US should help the US or should help South Africa and should help Iraq and Asian countries, so we will be able to build up our future. This is so going nowhere, right? Explanation. This might be funny if it weren't actually said. This is a case where it is more likely that the gibberish was a result of nervousness and confusion rather than an attempt to deceive. So, I would not argue that a fallacy was committed by the speaker. I would argue that it would be fallacious for a listener to accept this gibberish as an acceptable answer to the question asked. Although, perhaps the only ones who would accept this gibberish as an acceptable answer are the 1/5 of Americans who reportedly could not locate the United States on a world map. Exceptions. Some arguments require some jargon or technical explanations. Yes. And if you ever come across such arguments, make sure you get the terms right. Tip. Remember that good communication is not about confusing people. It's about mutual understanding. Don't try to impress people with fancy words and jargon when simpler words will do just fine. Alright. Argument by personal charm. I think we had this one. On TV, I'm sorry, although I don't have TV. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, Sir Otto. Let's see, where were we? Appeal by personal charm, also known as sex appeal for a mouth, eloquence, flamboyance, description. When an argument is made stronger by the personal characteristics of the person making the argument, often referred to as charm. Logical form. Person 1 says that Y is true. Person 1 is very charming. Therefore, Y is true. Example 1. Hi there, ladies. I just want to say that all of you have the right to do what you will with your bodies, including the right to abortion. Explanation. The charm of the arguer is irrelevant to the issue of abortion. Example 2. Let me start by thanking the wonderful people of this town to host this great event. Oh, that, Otto. Okay. I would be honored to call you all my friends. As friends, I want to tell you that streaking should be legalized. Explanation. Buttering up the audience is actually a technique that is suggested because it is effective. If you know your argument is weak and compensate by laying the charm, you are committing this fallacy. If you are letting the charm affect your decision, you are also committing the fallacy. Exception. If the argument being made is directly related to the charm of the arguer, as in arguing that he or she would be better host for a new show where charm does matter, then no fallacy has been committed. Alright. Argument by repetition. Argument ad nauseum. Argumentum ad nauseum. Proof by assertion. Description. Repeating an argument or premise over and over again in place of better supporting evidence. Alright, so this is just like propaganda. Gotta catapult the propaganda, right? We've done this one. Argument from age. I think we may have done this one from before, but we will see. Argument from age, also known as wisdom of the ancients. Interesting. Description. The misconception that previous generation had superior wisdom to modern man. Thus, conclusions that rely on this wisdom are seen, accepted as true or more likely than they actually are. More true than they actually are, not likely. Blah, blah. Logical form. Person 1 says that Y is true. Person 1 was an ancient mystic. Therefore, Y is true. Well, you could say that Plato says that Y is true. Plato was an ancient mystic. Therefore, Y is true. Right? The fact that he is a mystic, is enough to not accept any claim. The fact that he's ancient doesn't matter in this case. Example 1. Swami Patuti wrote back in the 6th century, to know thyself, to know oneself, is to one day self-know. You don't find pearls like that today. It's really ridiculous, this one. Explanations. There are many sayings today that are just as ambiguous, obscure, and nonsensical as the ones carved in stone 1500 years ago. The difference is perception. Especially with aged wisdom, we tend to read in meaning to ambiguity where none exists, or whether the author's intended meaning is impossible to know. Alright, so this Swami Patutu, to know oneself, is to one day self-know. It's really nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. It's just gibberish. Example 2. My Grammy told me that to be healthy I should have bacon and eggs every morning for breakfast. Explanation. It seems politically incorrect to suggest that older generations are not wise, but the fact is, wisdom is not necessarily a function of age. We have 2 generations of scientific knowledge that our grandparents did not have, and the world has changed quite a bit in the last 2 generations. Yep. While some advice may be timeless, other advice, such as the advice in the example, was based on the beliefs of the day and should be discarded like a container of chunky milk. Exception. When the age is directly related to the truth of the claim, as in, wine tastes better with age. And then here it says as tip, remember that even ancient Greeks said stupid things. Well, yeah. There were so many philosophical different ways in which one could think. And some of them are, so completely different from others that they must have seemed stupid. But to me, this is a bit of too much hammering on ancient people. If they were so unevolved and thinking stupid things, right? How do you come up with things like hieroglyphs and Sanskrit, right? That kind of writing. Or even other scripts that we can't even translate today. Like I don't remember the name of it, but it came up with that geologist that I had on. He also mentioned the script that nobody can figure out what it means, right? So was it that simple then? Yeah. Okay. An argument from fallacy. The fallacy, something like that. Let's see what this says. Argument ad logicam is it, also known as disproof by fallacy, argument to logic, fallacy, or fallacist's fallacy, bad reasons fallacy. Description: concluding that the truth value of an argument is false, based on the fact that the argument contains a fallacy. Logical form: argument X is fallacious, therefore the conclusion of truth claim or argument X is false. Right, so you'll probably remember me saying, if you spot a fallacy, that doesn't mean that it's not true or that the opposite is true. It just means you need to take a closer look. Example 1. Even Ivan says, "You cannot borrow my car because it turns back into a pumpkin at midnight." And then Sydney says, "If you really think that, you're an idiot." And then Ivan says, "That's an ad hominem, therefore I cannot be an idiot." Explanation: while it is true that Sydney has committed the ad hominem fallacy by calling Ivan an idiot rather than providing reasons why Ivan's car won't turn into a pumpkin at midnight, that fallacy is not evidence against the claim that Ivan actually is an idiot. Example 2. Karen: "I'm sorry, but if you think man used to ride dinosaur, you are obviously not very well educated." And then Ken says, so that was Karen, now Ken says, "First of all, I hold a PhD in creation science, so I am well educated." Well indoctrinated. In creation science, no less. Right? Where they will be able to explain to you, what happened from the moment of creation, of which I'm not sure even exists, this creation. Because it's one of those roads that lead you to infinite regress. And so to avoid that trap, they will say, well, creation started at a certain point, and there was this much energy, and this and that happened, and matter started to form, and universe started to expand, and all of that, and they can give, a reasonable, nice explanation. But first of all, if you ask them, well, at the start of this universe, was there already a law of gravity? Well, no, obviously not, because matter didn't even exist at that point. So, so then laws of nature, they evolved as matter grew, came into existence? Is the question then, and then, they're stopped in their tracks, because they can't explain how a law like that would evolve, right? They don't call it a law for nothing. It doesn't change, right? So, but in evolving is a changing, see? And so, and another thing is that they can give this good, quite reasonable, not to me acceptable anyway, but quite reasonable explanation as to what happened after the Big Bang. But if you ask them, where's the energy coming from to create this Big Bang, they also have no. They say, well, it came from nothing. Right? And why do they have to say that it came from nothing? It's because of the infinite regress problem. So they're basically forced into saying that. It's like being forced into saying, well, it must be God. Right? That's another way of solving this infinite regress problem. But the problem starts when you say there is such a thing as creation. That's an assumption. That's taken as, well, it must be so. But one should ask the question, is that so? First, before you start, building all kinds of theories, and then ending up in, when questioned, ending up in infinite regress. That's not allowed, you see. And they know that that's not allowed. So that's why they have to say, well, the Big Bang came from nothing, which is an insane claim. Something doesn't come from nothing. It would break the law that they make themselves, well, not that they make themselves, but that they describe themselves as energy doesn't get lost. It only transforms from one thing into another, right? So they are violating their own rules by claiming that the universe sprang from nothing. Excuse me. Where were we? Oh yeah, the PhD thingy. Kent, first of all, I hold a PhD in creation science, so I am well indoctrinated. Second of all, your ad hominem attack shows that you are wrong, and man did use to ride dinosaurs. Karen, getting your PhD in a couple of months from a college in a trailer park is not being well educated. My fallacy is in no way evidence for man riding on dinosaurs. And despite what you may think, The Flintstones was not a documentary. Explanation. Karen's ad hominem fallacy in her initial statement has nothing to do with the truth value of the argument that man used to ride dinosaurs. Exception. At times, fallacies are used by those who can't find a better way to support the truth claims of their argument. It could be a sign of desperation. This can be evidence for them not being able to defend their claim, but not against the claim itself. Variation. The bad reasons fallacy is similar, but the argument does not have to contain a fallacy. It could just be a bad argument with bad evidence or reasons. Bad arguments do not automatically mean that the conclusion is false. There can be much better arguments and reasons that support the truth of the conclusion. And then it says, I've never seen God, therefore he does not exist. Right, bad reasoning. However, it doesn't mean that the conclusion is wrong. This is a terrible reason to support a very strong conclusion, but this doesn't mean that God does exist. It simply means the argument is weak. Okay, the psychogenetic fallacy is inferring why an argument is being used, connecting it to some psychological reason, then assuming it is invalid as a result. Alright. So let's see, who's still here. Dan, another Dan, Mr. Cooper, and Dan C, JJ, and Joe, and Jules, and Otto, and Rode, and Vince, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening. I should be back next,
secrecy is repugnant in a free
and I hope you not have cold by then. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. Take care. Bye.
The secret oaths and the secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of scientific casts.